Yes.
Okay, we're live. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Just waiting for people to hop on. Looks like we are getting connected here. Oops, what happened to my screen? There we go. Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining us this evening. It is 7 p.m. on the West Coast, 10 p.m. on the East Coast, and anywhere else you're at, you figure out your own time because that's a lot for me to calculate. But thank you, Carlos, for being here. And I got to see you a little bit earlier today. That was really nice to see you in the flesh.
Yes. Great. You too. A little earlier, we'll talk a little bit about where I saw you today and
Yeah.
work that is being done right now. But welcome everybody for wherever you may be watching us from. I am here in Hollywood, my hometown, my city.
Yeah.
Raised here, and so much that enjoy about this particular town, and so much needs improvement. But overall, welcome everybody wherever you may be watching us from. We appreciate you. We thank you for tuning in, and we thank you for always showing your love and support to us here at Stand Up Fight Back.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining us. You're watching Stand Up Fight Back, where we discuss strategy and analysis for the progressive movement. I'm Margot Pies. I'm one of your co hosts on this show. I'm a scientist, engineer, and occasional journalist. And over here on this side, that's Carlos Marroquin. He is a wonderful, an amazing grassroots organizer, as he mentioned, based in California. And he is the other co-host on this show. And we're going to be talking about some bigger issues today. We're going to go over a little bit of the latest IPCC report, which is the big international panel on climate change. And they just put out a report on adaptation, and it's got some really important information there that I think everybody needs to hear about. And it also ties in, of course, with the situation going on in Ukraine with Putin's invasion there and the country's exports of fossil fuels. So, Carlos, why don't we get started? What
Right.
would you like to touch on first?
Well, first of all, our hearts always go out to those people that are, you know, that are victims, literally victims of these wars, these endless wars that we see. If they end one, they start another one. As soon as one ends, here comes another one, and the people that are caught up in these wars are that end up suffering the most. So we have a lot of people suffering in Ukraine right now, uh, and also in Russia, because this is affecting some members of the community in Russia because of the embargoes and the different restrictions that is being put on them. So the people always end up suffering. It's not the people that making the decisions. They okay. They have it theirs. They got whatever they need. They have protection, everything. They don't have to worry about the bombings and all that stuff. It's the people that live in these communities, in these cities, in these towns, uh, in the areas that are being bombed. So our hearts really go out to them because things continue to happen.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. These sanctions, oh, Carlos, a minor malfunction. Well, anyway, these sanctions, while Carlos gets himself back together, these sanctions often harm the people rather than the leaders or
Right.
the elites or the oligarchs, whatever you want to call them. And it's usually the people of the country that suffer from sanctions. And sanctions are really a form of economic warfare. So, uh, basically it's like committing, it's like an act of war, but it's an economic act of war. And I think that sanctions themselves are very dangerous, very deadly. So you have to draw a fine line. As much as we don't like to see what is happening in Ukraine right now, we also don't want to hurt the people of Russia, because this isn't their fault either. They didn't ask for Putin to invade a a formal, their neighbor, right? They really didn't ask for that. That's something that Putin decided on his own, and I really worry about what will happen to them in their country as Russia becomes more isolated. So it's a very sad situation right now, Carlos.
Right. Well, we talk about, and we talk about areas that are being bombed. People are not asking for this, and unfortunately, you have um, planning by the military where they mingle themselves with the civilian population,
Mm-hmm.
and the military do not, do not go a length to avoid, killing the innocent. They drop the bombs whatever they think that they need to be dropped, and ask the questions later. And and again, these are the things. This is the cost of war. This is again the consequences of decisions that are made, and where war is being pushed regardless of who gets affected by it. And and many people get affected by this. We're going to see issues regarding the food, water, just normal life. People that have normal lives, many are fleeing. We had some of our guests here last week, where we had a woman that, fortunately, the area where they're living is not a key area for Russia. So they're not as affected as much as some others in key areas, of key strategic areas that Russia wants, or that even Ukraine wants to protect, because all those things may affect them. When it comes to war, yes, they're supposed to have certain things in place that are supposed to be sacred, but nothing is sacred in war. Nothing. You know, even with all the laws that they may put in there, all the rules, all engagement of rules of war, these countries, they don't respect those things. They're gonna do whatever they're gonna do, and then hopefully they feel that hopefully they will never be prosecuted for war crimes. And we see the kind of war crimes that have existed throughout the years, throughout the different wars, and a lot of people are never held accountable. A lot of those leaders that committed massive crimes against humanity, they don't get persecuted. And those are the things that we look at. But overall is the impact that it has. Look, right now this particular war is creating a lot of people to migrate to other countries. They fleeing violence, and some of them are actually making it to the United States, and that's creating a situation over the border here at the United States and Mexico, where a lot of the people that are fleeing the violence over from Ukraine are being allowed in much quicker than people that have been sitting at the border for months, if not a
Mm.
couple, already fleeing violence from Central America. So that created another problem where now people are saying, why is it that we've been waiting here patiently? We have we have been fleeing the same kind of violence of internal wars within our countries, but we're not being allowed in. Yet people from these other countries are being allowed in much easier. Actually,
Mm.
Ocasio or Cortez said some words to that regards. And there's a few politicians that have been actually bringing that up. Why is the difference? What happened to the people of Haiti that came here seeking asylum? They
Yeah.
were in. They actually were turned back and sent back to their country, regardless of what the conditions were at that time in those areas of the world. And some of them, like I say, have been fleeing extreme violence, but yet we have a system here that discriminates, a system that picks on, allows people to come in based on the color of their skin. These are the facts, that we can no longer deny. So
That's
we
right.
have a system that is racist,
Right.
immigration policies that are racist, and let's face it, let's talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I found in this reverse in Europe to be really crazy because all this time we've seen all of these refugees coming through from the Middle East, from other war-torn parts of the world, trying to make their way over the Mediterranean to get into the European countries to seek asylum. And so many of these people were turned away, demonized, and basically they were told you're not welcome in Europe. And yet, in this crisis here, the European countries are saying like, oh, please come, we will take you in, we will find a place for you to stay. They're showing up, Europeans are showing up at the train stations to welcome the Ukrainian refugees. And on the one hand, of course, this is good. It's good to see this type of humanity on display, but it's hard to ignore the past decade of of inhumanity that has been displayed against people who were not European, who were trying to get in, who didn't have blonde hair and blue eyes, whose skin color was dark brown, and who came from regions of Africa and the Middle East, and who had non-Christian religions. When they tried to come in, they were ignored. So it's been a very eye-opening experience. And I don't know, Carlos, I don't know if you saw any of some of the early reporting on when this war broke out in Ukraine, and some of the reporters were saying things like, oh, I mean, this just really gets me because I never thought that this would happen in Europe. This is Europe. And I was watching that and thinking, hello, like it was only like 80 years ago that one of the worst atrocities to ever happen in modern history happened in Europe by a German who murdered 6 million Jews systematically on European soil, right? I don't know. Is it like people just forget these things, or they just purposely push these narratives? But either way, it comes across so tone deaf and so racist. It just really reveals like how racist people are even in Europe, I think.
Right. Well, these are selective memories,
Mhm.
that selective policies, selective, um, crises that we're going to put focus. And oh my gosh, our hearts go out to these particular people. But if the people don't meet certain, criteria, or certain demographic, then, well, they must have done something wrong for them to be in that situation. A good example here at the border, we have a southern border which borders with Mexico. Then you have your northern border, borders with Canada. You have the Republican Party that has been very vicious against the people from Central America, South America, or any Latin country, and they demonize the people that seek refuge. But now we saw a protest that was being pretty much orchestrated by the Republican Party, or supported by the Republican Party, with the truckers over here all of a sudden, oh my God, these poor people, and they suffering so much. So the mandates and this and that, they will create any kind of narrative to make those people look like victims. You
Right.
know, yet the people right in the South going through the same things. Oh my God, no, we need to check them because they bring in disease. They're doing this. They bring in that. It's like you see the real side of America, of the way some people think in America, that are very racist, that are very uh, ignorant concerning a lot of the situations that exist. They brand a certain thing a certain way, but if it is a different color of skin, they brand it different, and it's, oh my God, we got to do everything we can to help these people. And I'm not against it. Like I say, I advocate for people from any country, that is suffering, to be lifted, to be taken care of, to end the violence, and to embrace them, and welcome them. But if we're gonna do that with one country, we got to do that with everybody else, because the people from Haiti, they suffering big time, and they are suffering sometimes in the account of some of the things that we here in America have done against them.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Our policies, we pretty much uh, uh, rounded up so much money, so much funds, because of the earthquakes in Haiti and stuff like that. What happened to the money? It disappeared, and people still suffering. So yet they seeking refuge. So why is nobody speaking out about that? So definitely, Margaret, we have two kinds of policies. One for the wealthy and the people that have certain kind of or certain color of the skin, excuse me, and then other ones against the poor and people
Mhm.
of color. You know, they are not liked, they are not welcome, and they will create any kind of situation, condition, and policy to make it harder on them to not only vote, because we're seeing that, but we're talking about immigration policies, but also to accept and hear, and the violence that we promote in their own countries that create these kind of situations that create people to seek asylum, to escape. We create a lot of those conditions, in a lot of these countries.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The United States is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world, to paraphrase Martin Luther King Jr. And we certainly live up to the task. Yeah, the United States involvement in Haiti, involved in various coups, various destabilization ever since they were able to declare their independence as a nation of free slaves. And it's been an uphill battle for them against the West that basically turned them into indentured slaves of debt, to punish them for freeing themselves. And so, yeah, we owe them. We owe them reparations. All the West, the rich West nations, own reparations in a way to Haiti. Of course, we never think about that. And at the very least, they deserve to be allowed into the United States when they seek asylum. Absolutely. The other thing that bothered me early on social media about the coverage in Ukraine was that I saw the use of some clips from Palestine being spread as misinformation. It was being spread as if that these clips were coming from Ukraine. And one of them was of a young girl. Now she's like 20 years old now. And she had blonde hair, fair skin. You don't always, not you don't see a lot of blonde hair in Palestine, but there are a lot of fair skin, blonde hair people in Palestinians as well. So she was always standing up for her family, fighting against the Israeli soldiers who would come. They're trying to take their home, and there was this one video of her like slapping an Israeli soldier because they had just shot one of her cousins in the head. And this clip was being used as if this was a Ukrainian standing up to a Russian soldier. And it was appalling because here are the Palestinians, right? So here in this moment, people are like rallying against this video, like saying like, yeah, rah, 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 support the Ukrainians. Look how brave they are. But it was a Palestinian. And yet we don't see anybody rallying in support of the Palestinians in their struggle. And this is not to say that what is happening in Ukraine isn't important and that their struggle isn't real. Of course, it is real, and it is horrible what is happening there. But it's just a commentary on the media narrative and what is presented as acceptable for the West to support, or what are U.S. and European interests. What's okay for us to stand behind and say and rally along with a certain group of people. And when it comes to the Palestinians, we're not allowed to support them. We're not allowed to support their right to defend themselves against Israeli soldiers. So it's so this whole thing that's happening around just highlights how much hypocrisy and how much racism and how we have in these narratives.
Right. And the political chaos that is here in the United States, because at the end of the day, both parties support war, are supporters of the military industrial complex. Both parties are. And we celebrate patriotism behind a flag and behind, uh, the strength of a military, but yet your own citizens are you know pretty much slaves to poverty, are enslaved to extreme poverty that they live in. We have our own citizens that sleep on the streets, that have no food to eat, that are lacking healthy food. We have our own citizens that struggle day in and day out, in trying to survive. Yet, we wanna mingle in foreign affairs, which I am not against. I think that we need to, as leaders, as a nation that proclaims, liberty and justice for all, that has to come, to be at home first. Because how can you try to express democracy somewhere else and you don't have it at home?
Right.
We want to send our soldiers, our children to wars, to so-called, defend democracies or to proclaim democracy, but yet we don't have that at home. We have extreme violations of human rights here at home. So that's a huge problem, a
Hmm.
hypocrisy of the highest levels, from both parties.
Yeah.
And we don't see them advocating, with passion as the way we advocate to go to war with that same passion. Can you imagine if we use the same passion and we find the money out of nowhere? We find the money to go to war, but we don't find the money to pay for housing. We don't find the money to pay for Medicare. We don't find the money to pay, to get rid of student debt. We always ask they always ask the questions, well, how are we going to pay for it, and this and that, make every single excuse. But yet when it comes to wars, there's always money. There's plenty of money for that. There's absolutely
Yeah.
plenty of money supported by both parties.
Well, that's because our wars are funded through debt, through deficit spending. So there's always money if you can just create debt. And so our wars since Vietnam have been funded by debt. And this whole thing about, well, how can we pay for these things at home? I mean, it's hypocritical because we are paying for war through debt. So the counter argument is, well, why not pay for everything else with debt, right? Like if you're gonna just keep passing it along, you might as well pay for these other things in the same way, which I think really is partly the argument from the MMTers like Stephanie Kelton and Randall Wray. I think that there's some issues with MMT, but anyway, I think that's sort of the line of thinking that they present, which is like you don't actually need to have the money, right? You just deficit spend your way through these big programs, and I mean but that's what we do with war. That's how we fund it, through our treasuries.
And
We have other countries that hold them, and
right,
they hold our debt.
all of a sudden you have the Republican Party that their conservative side pops out, and they like fiscal responsible, and they want to know where every single dollar is spent, and it is irresponsible for us to put debt to our children. But you're doing that already, for crying
Oh
out loud.
yeah, they
it's,
do.
it's nothing but hypocrisy from both sides, and it stinks. I want to let you know that if you're a Republican pushing these policies, your policies stink. If you're a Democrat pushing these same policies, your policies stink as well. It's like, get it together, people. Push for some policies that are actually going to lift people out of poverty. Push from some poverty, some excuse me, some
Policies.
policies that actually will lift people and house them and give them a roof over their heads. Push for policies that are going to bring care and healthcare and benefits to the people, to the seniors, to our working class, to the veterans, for crying out loud. Many veterans sleep on the streets. It's like, if you want to call yourself a patriot, it's like, fight for that. Fight so
Right.
that person has a right to be a doctor.
Right. And we used to spend on these things, right? Before we went off the gold standard in the early 70s, our balance sheets were pretty well balanced, right? What went in, what out. We paid for things through taxes. We found ways to raise money for this. And actually, like for example, the wars before Vietnam were funded through war bonds. And these war bonds actually you buy them, and then the government would tell you exactly what your money went to. Like your war bonds, the money that you paid, that you bought here, went to fund buying X number of tanks or this kind of artillery or whatever. Like you actually had a receipt for accountability of how this war was being funded and where the money was going. So people had at least some connection to how the spending was going. And again, we were able to fund a lot of things through taxation.
Well, what happened is the companies got hip to that, and they start seeing the large amount of money that
Oh
actually,
yeah,
were made by war. So this is where they start pushing their industrial complex, the
right.
military complex, to pretty much overtake this, and they start doing it in a very slick way. They start uh, pretty much uh, putting, candidates to run for office. And then once they were in office, they were able to change the laws that would allow them to funnel all this money to this industrial complex. And the same thing is happening right now, and we need to pay really close attention. We have right now we have the military, the Russian military that pretty much took out the satellites for Ukraine. And who do we have all of a sudden, intervening, introducing his products,
Oh God.
to say pretty much, I will save the day. Who do we have? Musk, Elon
That
Musk,
guy,
right?
that guy never misses a crisis to pump his own bags. Yeah,
Exactly.
he's talking about Starlink and his total crap. He's like on Twitter and he's saying things like, "Oh yeah, please be careful with your Starlink satellite because we're the only thing providing internet in this region and we're a target." And like, are
But all
you kidding
but
me?
that all this has been pre-planned, because pretty much this allows them to have contracts with governments and control and unlimited funding and money coming their way. This is in a way is a smart move for them. They position themselves to have a specific, part of the industry, part of services, ready to go at a moment's notice, where they can make triple the money that they were making before. And this guy was making billions of dollars a second. He's, believe you me, that he's going to be able to put himself, you know, in that kind of a position where the future belongs to this kind of minds, and no one is advocating for the people. And they're not doing it because they actually give a damn about the world. They're doing it all for profit. Elon Musk is just doing this for profit. He doesn't care about it. It's profit.
Well, Elon Musk is just a narcissist, and this is not the first time that he's tried to pump his bags on something like this. There was that a while ago. There was like a group of like scuba divers or something, kids that had gone trapped, and he claimed that SpaceX could build some sort of device that could help get into this cave, and then he got in a fight with like a professional who was working on it, and it was just, it was totally pointless. Like he had nothing to offer them, but it was just a way for him to get some media attention. So he's just full of crap. But you're right about the military industrial complex, of course. But this ties in again to what happened when we went off the gold standard. And Michael Hudson, he's a really fantastic economist, wrote a book called Super Imperialism, which I recommend to anybody who's interested, or even just to watch some of his lectures online where he talks about this. Was that he realized that actually getting off of the gold standard was fantastic because now you could finance anything with debt through these treasury bonds. So other countries, when they would get dollars, what could they do with it? All they could do was buy up these treasuries. And so they were buying up our debt and funding all of our domestic issues, or our wars and things like that, so that it made it possible for us to have these forever wars like in Afghanistan. Like if we were not on the particular uh, finance fiat system that we're in now, in terms of not having basically of being able to just fund everything through large amounts of debt, we probably would not be able to have wars like this going on for decades on end. So this was a really convenient thing. It's not clear from what I understand from Michael Hudson's work that the U.S. actually knew that they were able to do this until he wrote this book. But one way or the other, they figured it out, and they realized that they could become that the US could become an even more powerful country through this approach of deficit spending. So that's how we get these wars. And yeah, of course, it's great. All these contracts every year, we give close to $1 trillion to funding to the Department of Defense, and then all that money goes out into the military industrial complex, into the industry, to pay for new weapons research, and it keeps an entire industry alive. And it's a huge portion of our money that goes in that direction.
And the interesting thing about this market is that we are not any safer. We're spending record numbers of money for defense, and we are not any safer. We're not. You saw what happened over at the Capitol, from the inside. Doesn't matter how much money we're spending on defense, you have problems here at home, homegrown problems. And yet we're spending a lot of money. We're spending so much money on police. We're spending so much money on all these programs that do very little to bring real changes, beneficial changes. I said beneficial because if the people are not benefiting by this, then the only ones that benefit by this are, again, big money. Is the corporations, is all these military forces that are put in place, and sometimes to terrorize our own people. So, look, I'm not against the military to a certain point. I'm a veteran. Everybody knows that. But if we are not serving this the right way, and we're spending more money on military than on the people, something's wrong with that picture off the bat. It's like, if we're sending people there to fight for the rich with every single war, that's what it's become. It's like we're not fighting. We can call it, fighting for democracy, but the reality is, even this war is about the oil, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's just all of these wars are about resources. I remember when I was younger, my dad would tell me like, "Oh yeah, all these wars are about oil," and I felt like maybe it's a little conspiratorial, but actually no, like these wars really are about resources, and in particular energy resources, because the way our economic system works is that we need to keep growing. Like our GDP has to keep growing, so you need energy to do that, right? So there's a correlation there. So we go out and look for more fossil fuels because we are addicted to fossil fuels, and we need them to make all of our plastics. We need them to make all of our consumer products that we just dump, like, after a few years, with this like built-in obsolescence. So we have a really broken economic system right now, and it's incredibly tied to fossil fuels. And in fact, maybe we should transition into this now. A lot of these gas companies recently were saying they were going to back out of various oil deals with Russia. But it seems like actually some of them are still dealing in Russian fossil fuels and importing them into Europe, even after they've said they're going to pull out of these deals. And why? Because, well, Europe is dependent on gas still. They had an opportunity to really ramp up their renewable energy transition, and they haven't. I mean, it accelerated for a little while, but it's slowed down. And instead of carefully bringing down their nuclear power plants, knowing when to do it at the right time, they brought down a lot of their nuclear power plants too early. And they ended up switching to natural gas, which doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, I don't really know the situation with some of the nuclear power plants out there, but it seems to me that they couldn't have all been in a dangerous predicament, right? Like, I mean, look at the nuclear power plants in Ukraine. They seem to be withstanding shelling. So I mean, I imagine that the ones in Europe could still be running right now, but they really blew it in terms of strategically planning this transition. And so they have been incredibly dependent on Russian natural gas. And I wanted to mention some points from this Common Dreams article that I came across. I'm just gonna. It's called "Oil and Gas Giants Under Fire for Fueling Russian War on Ukraine." It's a really great article on in Common Dreams. I recommend it. Basically, companies like Shell, for example, bought cheap Russian fossil fuels, Russian oil recently, and they bought it at a bargain price. So right now, when Russia is supposed to be basically canceled, Shell decided, hey, I see a bargain. Let's buy some oil for really cheap, and then we can turn it around and make a profit. Well, they got it. They got caught. They got caught doing that, and now they're claiming that they're going to donate whatever portion of this purchase or of what the sale of this oil that they bought so cheap to some sort of organizations that will help the people in Ukraine. But that was not their intention, right? Like here they're claiming we're going to back out of some deals with Gazprom, and then they go and turn around and they buy gas from Russia. So the point of this article was that the Western fossil fuel companies are still funding this war in Ukraine because oil is like the major export out of Russia. So if you're really serious about being opposed to this war in Ukraine, you probably shouldn't be buying fossil fuels from Russia, and yet that's what we're seeing. So we have a real problem here that this war, it's not just a war, right? It's not just, and it is not just an energy resource war either. It's a climate change war too.
Right, right. And said that everything is tied up, everything is interlinked with each other. And Margaret, it's troubling to see the levels of, I'm gonna say, is irresponsible, decisions that are made at every single level, and even with, what's happening in Europe, what's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in, the United States, is we have lost sight of ourselves in a sense that, our world is collapsing, is having major pains. It's so many things that are happening with climate change that that we are not serving right. We are not paying attention to the, and instead of using, in this age with all the technology, instead of coming together to fight the real problems that exist, for humanity, is like we're fighting over land, over, fighting for the same resources that are creating the problems that that destroying the planet. Is like they're still fighting for oil. They're still fighting for the same resources instead of bettering ourselves. It's like, and we're defending the same you know um industries. We're trying to save them so bad. It's like, come on, people.
Well, it's a really complicated situation, I have to say, in terms of the fossil fuel dependency. I mean, it's crazy. You're absolutely right. We shouldn't be focused on this anymore, especially now when we really have a very limited window to keep ourselves under 1.5 degrees Celsius or even 2 degrees Celsius of warming. And the problem is that there's really bad incentives built into the economic system. And it's because the corporations, the fossil fuel corporations, along with the banking corporations, have really captured state power, in particular in the United States. And so they can put pressure on politicians, and they can make it so that certain laws are passed for certain types of subsidies or tax breaks for these companies, to make it easier to funnel money into the fossil fuel industry. So a lot of like coal plants that are still being built right now, when we shouldn't be building any coal plants anymore, are made possible because of these really bad subsidies. And right now there's something like 5.9 trillion subsidies every year that are paid for are given over to the fossil fuel industry. So this whole system is basically designed to keep us addicted to fossil fuels, right? So like when climate activists are saying we need system change, this is what they're talking about. We literally need system change. We need to
Right.
change the whole structure of the system. So so that goes down to like all of these tax breaks, all of these subsidies, like reining in the banking industry, which has caused so much harm to people. You know, going back beyond, you know, before the Great Recession, obviously they've been playing this game, and the Federal Reserve with maintaining low interest rates and allowing for a highly speculative environment, because you basically can get money for cheap, and funding these massive boom bust cycles. And so every time we have a bust, like at the Great Recession, right, in 2008, it's people that get hurt. And
Right.
this is what we're seeing. So all of this is like what climate activists are saying, like, we need system change. This is what they mean. And until we get system change, Carlos, I think we're going to keep seeing problems like this, because this is how the system is programmed to work. It's
Right.
just
Ex-
how it is.
and we're pretty much defending those same systems because, I can see it say, well, we're going to defend, you know, we're going to go and fight and we're going to do this because we're actually fighting because we want to get rid of all these serious, you know, problems or, you know, powers that have been seriously oppressing the people, but it's like we go back to the same thing. It's a cycle, it's a circle, it's you know we're doing the same things, we just relabeling them, we branded them different, but at the end of the day, we are the little mouse on the little on the, how do you call it, spin-
And the wheel.
on the spinning wheel, right?
Yeah.
We're doing running there, like, and we think we get going somewhere. We're going nowhere, people.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not going nowhere. As long look at the prices of food right now. It is
Hmm.
outrageous at the prices of food, and all these companies. If you dig in, and everybody's talking about, a food crisis that's gonna worsen. It's gonna deepen. A water crisis is going to worse. But what are we doing about it? We're still running around the same thing, and we have everybody's running in the little wheel, spinning themselves to nowhere.
Yeah, yeah, of
Nowhere.
course. I mean, and again, it goes back to climate change again, because we are already seeing problems with crop production. Every degree that the planet warms, there's a percentage of reduction in our ability to produce crops. Our agriculture becomes more difficult. It's too hot. The soil cannot retain the moisture, even if we have these high rain events where you get now, because of climate change, because the atmosphere absorbs more water vapor, so we have like these greater rainfalls happening in a shorter period of time. Even though that happens, because it's warmer in between these rainfall events, the soil dries up faster. So this becomes a cycle, right? And it affects our crops, and they start to fail. And the plants are used to a certain temperature range, a certain type of moisture in the atmosphere, and so they start suffering. And so right now we've seen pockets of crop failures or reduction in production uh, of various food staples. And so that affects the price. And then couple that with the fact that Russia is a major exporter of staples like wheat, and you're going to see prices go up. And then couple that with the fact that, with all of the quantitative easing that happened over the pandemic, while the Federal Reserve tried to prop up the stock market so that the rich, wouldn't go bust. They pumped more money in, and this all contributed to inflation. And now we have Putin invading Ukraine, so that again destabilizing the energy prices. Gas in California now is rapidly approaching $6. I mean, I cannot believe the prices out there right now. It's
Unbelievable.
incredible.
Gas
And
station here, Margaret, is over $7 a gallon. Over seven
already in Hollywood,
over here, but in the west side. But look,
dang.
uh, Margaret, we are heading for perilous times. We don't know or may end up with. I know that there is a call right now for the airspace, for restriction on airspace, which can mean that you force NATO to to uh, to to secure that airspace, but that would draw again troops from NATO that can easily cause a third world war. You know,
Yeah.
so it's delicate. It's it involves many different pieces, and I'm not saying that we are experts, but based on the stuff and analysis that the stuff that we read and know the questions that we ask, these are serious things that the world is facing. But here at home, I like to bring you here at home is things are not changing, things are getting worse for the average person, and people are demanding, you know what I mean, to have security, to have answers, to be able to be in a place that people don't have to be scared for their lives with where they're going to be sleeping today tonight, or how they're going to feed their families, how they're going to clothe their children. All those are real things, just like the wars are real. And right now I think that it's an opportunity for us to examine what's going on and see how we personally are where's our priorities, what are we focusing on a personal level.
Right. Yes, exactly. And we have to figure out how people are going to survive this if these prices keep going up. There's going to be a lot of people struggling. I mean, these gas prices are already hard enough, and I think that a lot of working class people often don't get to have the luxury of living close to their job, or they don't have the luxury of working from home, so they can't save money. They have to pay these gas prices. They have no choice. So what are they going to do? What can we do for them? How can we keep people afloat in this country? What's Congress going to do? These are really important questions, and I don't think that I haven't heard too much yet really from our politicians about what kind of actions are going to be taking place to keep people afloat while these prices are going up.
Well, because there is an internal fight right now for power in politics. We see the same arguments going back and forth between Republicans and Democrats. We see we saw the fight with Trump. We see the fight with Biden. We see the fight with Congress, the senators, Manchin. You know, uh, the Supreme Court now involved. We see all these fights for power, and who's got the last word, and which direction is the country gonna go in. Here's a fact check for all of us. This country is pretty much, you know, composed of different kinds of people from all colors, from all walks of life, from all from all kinds of religions. So if we're going to fight for freedom for speech, freedom of religion, it's not just Christianity. It's not just the speech that you agree with. It has to be also the speech that you don't agree with.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
part of this is what kind what kind of country do we want? Where are we going to push our politicians to? And unfortunately, there is a power struggle within them right now, and they, at the end of the day, regardless of who wins, the people are always left behind, regardless
Hmm.
whether it's Democrat or Republican. Whoever wins, we are left behind. Why? Because these politicians, whoever is in charge, serve to their masters, serve to big money, to the best interest, which is big money, corporations, the ultra rich. And I think that's what the problem is for all of us, for all
Yeah.
of the oligarchy, the one percenters. the people that pay no taxes, the people that wants it all for them and nothing for the people. They give you crumbs. They give us crumbs. That's where our real fight is, and they have put us to fight each other. But we are fighting each other instead of fighting, you know, this this uh, this power, the superpowers that control, our politics, which is again the super rich. And I think that Bernie had always had it right. Is the fairness, a system that we need to create a system that works for all of us, not just the rich.
Right, exactly. I think one solution here for progressives to think about is something called radical municipalism, which Debbie Bookchin, that's Bookchin, has written about in the past. Her father was Murray Bookchin, who came up with a concept called communalism and social ecology. And the thing about this is that it's all about taking over your community and taking over the politics in your community and distributing the power and the decision making within it. So literally your own town, your own city, you should be running for office. Run for those offices, focus on those positions, and then find ways to increase the involvement of the the citizens in that town by creating like public assemblies where people can come in and discuss the issues that matter to them at the local level. And when you start doing that, you can start creating creating more power for yourselves to make the decisions. Because I think that on the local level, a lot of well, first of all, it's a lot easier to run. You don't need as much money. And second of all, it's regularly fairly ignored, right? So you have an opportunity to really take over your school board, you can take over the city council, right? And then you can start shaping the narrative, shaping the policies in your city. It's not going to get us the White House, right? It is not going to get us these nationwide laws, but but you can get things to happen. You can make things happen a lot faster if you can start doing it locally. So if we
Especially,
all,
yeah, Margaret, especially if you start like getting involved in neighborhood councils, in community
mm-hmm,
meetings, then
mm-hmm,
pretty much you start building your strength or you start building your base. And you could go to your congressman and start demanding certain things because
yeah,
you did your district that got him elected.
yeah,
And if we have the power within the district where we have the numbers, pretty much you're going to dictate what this politician, you know, should do or should be doing, or how he should be voting, he or she should be voting. Because
yeah,
now you control your district, it's the community leaders and stuff. The thing is that a lot of these neighborhood councils, you know who's running, you know who's on the board of these neighborhood councils. We have lawyers that work with developers. You have all these people that they assign from big corporations, like from the movie industry. You have people that they send to sit on these boards, to
mhm,
run for these boards.
yeah,
Why? They are going to push for policies that will pretty much line up with what they are trying to do, either another development or continue to ask for more incentives for tax breaks, etc. There's so many things, so many benefits that a lot of these big corporations are receiving. Why? Because they have people sitting in key places in local government at the
right,
lowest level, at
yeah,
neighborhood councils. I know because I served on the neighborhood council, and I can tell you very few of those people that sit on those neighborhood council will oppose any of the new developments because a lot of them, have been influenced by developers.
right,
If
yeah.
not, developers have their own people sitting in there.
Yeah, so we progressives need to start taking over these neighborhood councils. We have to start taking over the city councils. We have to start taking over the school boards. And the ironic thing is that the Republicans have been doing this for a long time. They figured this out, and it's crazy because really it should be more progressive, left leaning type people who understand the localism better and community organizing better than the Republicans, and yet they figured it out. And so we need to get caught up with that. We need to start focusing on that.
So, they've been doing it through their churches,
Hmm.
but uh, you know, prior to Trump, they were doing a lot of the work through their churches, but it was all community-based churches. And then all of a sudden, they got involved in politics. Christian churches began to get in politics because Trump was stirring them up. And now what we have is we have a lot of these churches that got involved in politics, which took them away from their mission as a
Hmm.
as those that will fight for the poor, et cetera, et cetera,
Yeah.
with an agenda from Republicans, But pretty much this is what they do. They see now, oh, I'm going to run for city council, and then they have the support of the entire congregations and whatever their denomination at the Christian church is, whether it's Assemblies of God or perhaps Four Square Church or a Baptist church. They have numbers. These are real
Yeah.
numbers. But the danger with that is now they're mixing politics with church, with the mission of the church, and now that's being noticed. And there's a huge pushback because a lot of the churches are losing membership because the average church people don't want to get involved in politics.
Right.
Leaders that tasted a little power, they forgetting their mission of the church, and now they seem being to Washington or being invited to with a congressman, and they feel empowered. That's dangerous to the church. And maybe one day we can talk about that. I tell you this because I have a background
Yeah.
in the ministry as a former pastor. I understand the structure of the church. I understand, the outreach the churches do and their mission, but they're playing a very, very dangerous part right now because you starting to involve themselves with politics. But my whole point here is that we need to be involved in local politics because that's where we are going to create a lot of change in our community.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think this really needs to be the focus for progressives, especially at the grassroots level, is that we really need to focus on the local level, local elections, taking over these offices, taking over these neighborhood councils, and really shaping things on the ground for ourselves and seeing what we can do at the local level.
Right. I like the fact that actually, just building programs at the local level, that is huge and so important. Many of you have ideas of projects that you would like to do to help your community. This is where you learn to organize and to work together with other people within your community and implement these ideas that you have, whatever they may be. Maybe you like to get involved with food distribution, you know, and you have ideas of how to, create a program that that can actually distribute food to some of the community. Um, Maybe I seen folks right now that the family, they have a background on cooking, and all of a sudden they're creating a kitchen for the community and they're cooking meals for people. So there is things that each one of you can do and get involved with at the local level, whatever that is. I was talking to some people today over at the new grocery store that we opened. It's an affordable grocery store from the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, health food for health programs. And what I love the most is spending time talking just to community members of the community, and they sharing so much information and what they envision to see done in their communities. And a lot of people love the fact that we're doing this, that we're providing affordable, you know, um, vegetables and produce for the community. I'm talking about affordable. The organization buys the groceries or the produce from the local farm, and they pretty much sell it to the public at their cost. There is no profit being made. So when I was sharing a lot with different community members about the program, I saw all of a sudden many of them with their own ideas of stuff that they always wanted to do. And they say, you know what? I really like this because I've been thinking of doing this all along, you know? And he said, well, come on. And there's room for other people to bring their ideas. And I'm not saying that you have to work through our organization. You can create your own thing. I see people, I met this young lady that she likes to cook vegan stuff. And it's like, why not? It's like, there's a lot of people out there that cannot afford vegan food. And because it's expensive. I'm not vegan, but I heard it is very expensive. And if you have a plan, a way that you can, help other community leaders and make a little money on the process to help yourself so that you could do more, why not?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, I popped off there. I plugged the charger into an outlet that was bad. so I didn't realize it, but anyway, I'm back. Yeah. I absolutely, that sounds fantastic, Carlos. We're on the hour now, but I wanted to quickly, if we could, unless you wanted to stay a little bit longer on this, I just wanted to go over the IPCC report that came out and just go through some of the bullet points that are in this news article and just let people know what's going on here. So the IPCC report, this one is on adaptation. So this is about climate change. They're going to have another one published later on mitigation. But adaptation one is really about how do we adapt our society to a changing climate. And it was a pretty somber report, to be honest, because they really, for the first time, I think, admitted that we've already experienced changes in our climate that are irreversible, at least on the scale of the lifespan of a human being. And because of this, we have to figure out how to change our lifestyle, change what we're doing in order to adapt to this new climate that we cannot undo. So, and they talked about losses and damages, meaning that there have already been losses, ecosystem losses or damages, to the environment or economic damages or whatever that have happened as a result of climate change, and those things need to be addressed. So there's a couple of key points here that I'll just read through I just want people to be updated, our viewers to be updated on what the report said. So I'm just going to read through them. So that the first bullet point, so all of this has to do with the fact that every small increase in warming, it ultimately results in escalating losses and damages across many systems. So this is from I'm reading this from an article from phys.org, which is a science website. And the article is called "The New IPCC Reports Grim Predictions and Why Adaptation Efforts Are Falling Behind." Okay, so these are the concerns. Under a high emission scenario where global emissions continue unabated, more frequent and extreme disasters will lead to over 250,000 unnecessary deaths each year worldwide. Up to 3 billion people are projected to experience chronic water scarcity due to droughts at 2 degrees warming, and up to 4 billion at 4 degrees Celsius warming, mostly across the subtropics to mid-latitudes. Projected flood damages may be up to 2 times higher at 2 degrees Celsius warming, and up to 3.9 times higher at 3 degrees Celsius when compared with damages at 1.5 degrees Celsius. Up to 18% of all those species assessed on land will be at high risk of extinction if the world warms 2 degrees Celsius by 2100. If the world warms up to 4 degrees Celsius, roughly every second plant or animal species assessed will be threatened. Even warming below 1.6 degrees Celsius will see 8% of today's farmland become climatically unsuitable for current activities by 2100. So this is a reminder that we're we're going down a path that is very dangerous to humanity. And right now we're in a worst case scenario because we have not ramped down our fossil fuel emissions. We're continue to increase our CO2 emissions continue to increase. And then on top of that, there's this rising concern about methane emissions and the fact that these fossil fuel companies that produce methane as a byproduct have made pretty extreme claims that they're like when they flare methane, for example, that it's like 90 something percent efficient, like a very high efficiency. But it turns out it's not. And there's also all sorts of abandoned wells, oil and gas wells going back 100 years that are leaking methane. And methane over a 20-year period is like something like 84 times as potent as CO2 is in trapping heat. So this is a real problem. And the closer we get to 2 degrees Celsius, the more likely we are to hit these irreversible tipping points, which is like, seeing the polar ice caps melt in the Arctic melting there because it's warming faster at the poles than it is coming in towards the center of the Earth. And the more likely we are to have no ice there, the harder it is going to be for the Earth to reflect back that sunlight. So it's going to keep getting warmer. And then there's permafrost up there. And if that permafrost melts even more, that's more methane that's going to end up in the atmosphere. And it's these future emissions that are going to continue to contribute to the increase in warming that we're seeing. It's not just the emissions that are already there. Of course, we all are already seeing damage from that. But it's that every emission that we put into the atmosphere, every greenhouse gas, the more greenhouse gases is going to put us towards a path of more and more warming. So that's why it's so important that we stop. But like we were talking about before, this economic system that we have right now, this system is broken. It's tied to fossil fuels. It's designed to incentivize the production and use of fossil fuels. So it is the system that we have to change. And that's why we have to find ways to do that. And right now it's at the local level that we have we probably have the most power to do that. But the problem is, Carlos, we have to face the fact that we're a little bit screwed. and the reality is that many people are going to be hurt by this because we can't change fast enough.
Exactly. And see, that has been a concern. This is why we raising the alarm. This is why we are shouting from the mountaintop, is because it's coming. It's here. And little to no serious attention is being paid to this. They patronize this. They speak about it when it's convenient, with no real policy behind it. It's like, oh, sure, climate change. Oh, that report. And they our leaders pretend to listen to this, but they're not listening. They pretend to be concerned, but they're not concerned. And I will tell you why I say that they are not listening and they are not really concerned, because otherwise they will jump on this and they will do something about it. Is that you can tell how much you care about something and ignore anything and don't lift a finger, and that speaks volumes of how much you're really concerned about something.
Yeah.
It's absolutely nothing, but you begin to move things and you begin to create, action plans, and you begin to bring people together and start, doing pretty much a lot of the stuff that needs to be done, whether it's, creating, committees with action plans, etc., and this and that, and moving stuff, and not say a single word. And you can start doing the work. And, I will bow down to you because, it's action speaks louder than words. We always heard that. And this is the time now. It's because we have been hearing everybody, even the media at one point, when Trump was in office, Oh my God, they were so concerned about a lot of these issues. They talked about climate change and this and that. Now that he's not in office, now that we're in a different situation, now they like watering it, they watering the conversation down.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that just reminds me of Joe Biden, President Biden's State of the Union, where he 0 times mentioned climate change. He had one little sentence that said, "Oh, we've got to put more money. We're going to double our investments in solar and wind." And that was it. That was it. And that was all because he was talking about infrastructure. I mean, how could he do a State of the Union without mentioning climate change, which is the greatest existential crisis that we're facing right now? I mean, that's like the incentives in this system are so bad that the politicians themselves cannot even think straight, right? They can't think straight about this. So it's a really big problem. So our viewers, we really have to focus on this, and we have to see the big picture, and we have to really think seriously about system change if we want a future for the younger generations who are going to live to see 2100.
Right. But if they don't want to listen, Mother Nature is going to make them listen.
Yeah, well.
Pretty much, we can get on the rooftops. We can sound the alarm, which we have. We can be protesting on the street, which we have. But at the end of the day, Mother Nature has a way of getting your attention. And these fires in California are not going to stop or subside. We have all these major events, catastrophic events, and it's unfortunate because people end up getting harmed by these things. But
Yeah.
those are usually the things that will tap in your shoulder and say, "Hey, you forgot about this."
Yeah.
Remember,
Well, the
and all
thing it
we end up paying more.
yeah.
We end up paying more trying to fix it after the fact.
Yeah,
It's
of course. Yeah, yeah, that's the thing. The thing is that what worries me is that we're going to have an extreme shock to the system from the climate change. And I think the question is whether we should have a shock to the system due to really bad situation to climate change, or should we have it from an economic standpoint? Let's have maybe an economic shock is less difficult to deal with, because we need something to break the status quo, to break this whole situation where we're on a certain trajectory. We have to get off the trajectory, so we need some kind of shock to the system to do it. But Carlos, I think we have to wrap up too. So why don't you go ahead and say your last thoughts on this?
going to happen in both sides. If
Mm-hmm.
how to spend time and come out with good policy and stuff, we're gonna end up paying the price at either way. Thank you everybody for watching us tonight, for being with us. We really enjoy being here and giving as much information as we can. We are not experts. We don't speak in behalf of a corporation or even our jobs or whoever. This Margaret and I speaking as advocates for issues and as activists. We are on the ground. We are talking to people, and we really are concerned about a lot of the issues. We thank you for watching wherever you may be watching us from. Margaret, thank you for being here, and this is the time that we try to reach to you, the community.
Right. Thank you so much, Carlos. Thank you. Great show, as always. Then thank you to our viewers for joining us. You've been watching Stand Up, Fight Back, where we discuss strategy and analysis for the progressive movement. I'm Margot Pius, and this is Carlos Maruki, your co-host on the show. We air every Sunday at 7 p.m. Pacific Time, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. So we'll see you next week at the same time. Oh, and we simulcast on Facebook and YouTube. So make sure you hit that follow button, hit the subscribe button, and share us with all your friends, your neighbors, your best friend, the person who does your nails at the nail salon. Let them know about our show, because we're here and we're not going anywhere until we get that change that we want. So take care, everybody, and have a really great week. Stay safe, get vaccinated, and be
Peace, everybody.
careful. See
Peace.
you. Bye.